Okay, ladies and gentlemen, dear delegates, if you think the search engine that we are using, Google, Yahoo, Bing, led you to probe the entire website, you are totally wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, you are barely scratching the surface of the internet, literally. Do you know or not, there is only 4% of the available surface website. 96% contents of the web is actually located at deep web, dark web. And do you have any idea about this? Have you ever accessed to dark web? Have you ever accessed to deep web? Rohan is an expertise in this. So he will be talking about dark web, deep web. And later part, Mr. Tai, he will be talking about the legal implication, the legal background, the legal framework in Malaysia that may or may not govern these dark web activities. And finally, the best, Mr. J. I will talk about him later because it's not in the slides here, right? So he will be talking something extra that is related to us, financial institution, especially when it comes to illegal activities and terrorism financing. So, we start with Rohan. That brings us, Rohan, this presentation, most of us here will want to know what is deep web and how different is this from dark web. Now, according to experts, ladies and gentlemen, this is from the facts because I have done research on this. I have never access to deep web, and I'm here moderating deep web. So during my research, I found out that this deep web is 500 times deeper, larger than the normal web, the surface web. So Rohan, when you start, how dark is the dark web? How deep is the deep web? Over to you, Rohan.
As you very rightly remarked, we leave the best for the last, Mrs. Jay Javeri. In the meanwhile, you'll have to listen to me. Whoops. So, I've done actually a lot of work on IP, intellectual property, and originally it was not deep and dark web, but it was just IP theft, etc. So the first paper that I had published was originally with NUS, with the International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research, under Dr. Rohan Gunaratna, who's also a speaker today. And the second paper that I published very recently was on IP theft, dirty money seeping through banks, which is really deep web, dark web, and you can find it on my website, which is rohanbedi.net. So in terms of the agenda, I'm going to be covering much of the content that I have in that paper, in that article, in the recent one. So I'll give you an introduction. I'll talk about how deep web dominates crime. And certainly the dark web has certain sinister uses, but from a broader fundraising, selling of fake goods, etc. perspective, it's certainly the deep web which is very, very important. I'll show you a typical deep web sales website. So, what would be the features of it. Then we'll talk about moving to the opaque dark web, what are the circumstances, etc. We'll talk about finding the bad guys. And we'll talk about what a bank's action plan could potentially be. I'll make some comments then on deep and dark web in terms of investigations. And then I'll take you through some enforcement cases associated with the dark web specifically. So IP has weak laws and enforcement almost world over, and I'll show you some slides to prove that. And they've been exploited by terror groups like Hezbollah and D Company. D Company is the Dawood company, which operates in India. Actually, he sits in Pakistan, in Karachi, but he's responsible for a number of the terror attacks in India. And so, IP, weak IP, he funds his crime through all kinds of IP crimes, which includes selling of fake goods, things like that. So the imports of counterfeit and pirated goods are worth nearly $500 billion a year, which is 2.5% of global imports, and this excludes online piracy. Online piracy has been particularly important in funding D companies' activities. So what do we mean when we say counterfeit goods? Counterfeit goods are fake goods, goods which are fake and may or may not have the logo of the company that they're purporting to represent. And pirated goods are typically when, for example, you have a Nike subcontractor who is overproducing and then selling those goods on the sly. So most of these goods, counterfeit and pirated goods, they get moved around via postal parcels, and greater than 62% of seizures are associated with counterfeit and pirated goods. More than 90% of the banks used to process credit card payments are Chinese. Okay? And even other payments in the US, for example, via credit cards or PayPal, ultimately end up in these Chinese banks. Spotting fakes is very, very difficult. Often low prices is the only indication that the item may be a fake. And even with the low price, they'll sometimes advertise it. You really can't make out because they'll say there's a manufacturing defect and therefore the price is so low. And not all buyers are innocent, so there are people who will deliberately go online to buy fake goods for the sake of the brand. Fake goods are typically sold via websites in the deep or dark web, mostly in the deep web, and I'll explain the reason why. Or they could be via eBay, Alibaba Group, and Amazon. So all these big online marketplaces also have the risk of fake goods being sold through them. Or this may be a case of using these online marketplaces, but only payments are settled via these online marketplaces. So they only use these online marketplaces for settling payments. Fraudulent sellers make paid search advertisements. As much as 1/3 of paid search advertisements for designer handbags are made by fraudulent sellers. Online piracy makes money via advertisements, via the ad networks. So online piracy is basically via advertisements. There are about 150 sites for online piracy, and half of these are from the US. And the top 100 for online piracy make as much as US $521 million annually. And when we talk of ad networks, we're talking of things like DoubleClick, AdSense, etc. And we're talking of brands being advertised on these websites. We're talking of brands like McDonald's, Hyatt Regency, etc. And cyber squatting costs trademark holders as much as $1 million per brand every year. So cyber squatting is where you register names and you resell them or you advertise on them, or even just typo squatting, which means like instead of Nike shoes, you'll have Nike's shoes, like that. Okay. So this is one quick slide on US Chambers International IP Index. And as you can see that there are a number of, they're based on an analysis of 35 indicators in 6 categories. And based on that, on this analysis, you can see that US has a very strong regime for IP. Singapore is not too bad. Canada is surprisingly not that high. Malaysia is somewhere in between. Then you come down, you'll see Philippines, you'll see Indonesia, you'll see India, and you'll see Pakistan. So this is the US 2017 Special 301 report on IP, where as you can see on the priority watch list, you have names such as China, India, Indonesia, Thailand. And on the watch list, you have names such as Pakistan and Vietnam in Asia. So the deep web dominates crime. It's accessed via ordinary browsers such as Internet Explorer or Google Chrome. It's preferred by criminals for reasons of its size, because it's 500 times the size of the surface web, and it contains 96% of the total content on World Wide Web. So as you can see from the picture on the right side, the public web is only 4% of the web content, and the deep web is 96%, which is 7.9 zettabytes. Typically, websites on the deep web are privately registered domain names, which means you can't find the details on who is. And they have fake contact details on who is. They're hosted on servers in countries with weak enforcement. And they are likely paid using bitcoins and anonymous prepaid cards. And even the registration process is probably carried out using VPN or using Tor to completely encrypt and anonymize the location of the guy who set up these websites. The web pages on these websites are protected from online searches. Firstly, by using meta tags that prevent indexing. So there's certain things which you put on your web page. Once you put that thing, it's a meta tag which basically says no indexing. When Google goes on it, it will not pick a picture of that website. Or these web pages could be protected by hiding content on a database behind a search engine on the website. So it's basically on a database. Or you could have password protected content. All right? And websites that are shut down can be replaced easily almost overnight. So anybody who has developed websites, and I've actually set up a number of my own websites because that's the cheapest way of doing it, will tell you that it is very, very easy to create websites. And certainly all you have to do is to keep a copy of that website. And the moment that is taken down, you simply upload this website to another link and you start your scam again. So typical deep web sales websites for fake goods would have if the criminal is sensible, right? Then he would have a password protected content requiring registration. So the landing page only has a login or registration option. And why would he do that? He would do it so that it becomes out of public domain data. And I'll explain the importance of that a little bit ahead, where we talk about a particular search engine with the US Department of Defense is trying to create called Mimix. So it becomes not public domain data. The actual URL will make no sense. For example, www.i132x. But it's hidden behind a mass forward domain name like www.nikeshoes-usa.com. So you will click on this, you will think you're buying Nike shoes from the States, and you will not know that the underlying website is a different one. That's very, very important to understand what a mass forward is. The typical email marketing, which is done by these kind of crooks, uses drip email campaign to avoid being categorized as spam, and it's focused on consumer buying habits. So the regular, full-fledged, proper marketing that gets done for fake goods. And of course, this same website will attract traffic from fake promotional profiles on social media sites, unauthorized mobile apps, paid search advertisements, and typo squatting. So different ways of getting traffic to this fake website. So moving to the opaque dark web. So the dark web, so deep web is, as you can see from the picture on the right, deep web is the majority portion, dark web is right at the bottom. But there's one major difference. Firstly, typically you will find that IP would move to the dark web, where websites get taken down and payment options get increasingly shut off. The important thing is payment options getting shut off. So as long as you have Chinese banks which are continuing to take your credit cards, etc., or any other processor for the credit cards, as long as you have that option, if I was a criminal, I would remain in the deep web. I would not go into the dark web, because on the deep web, I can sell fake goods to people who are actually looking for that good. They don't know it's fake, but that's because they use the normal browser. But if I move to the dark web, then the only time you're going to actually come there is if you've downloaded the Tor browser or you're using I2P or Freenet, and each of these are different networks, right? So it's much smaller. And so therefore, when you start downloading these browsers, etc., you have serious crime intentions. You're there for doing really bad, evil things. You're there for either transferring money for a terrorist operation, you're settling your hawala, or you're buying drugs, or you're selling drugs, or you're doing really bad crime, drug trafficking, things like that. So each of these browsers, which is Tor browser, I2P, or Freenet, these are separate. These are different. They create different independent networks. And you would only go on these if you are willingly searching for good quality fake or illegal goods. Goods on this media is largely, goods on the dark web is largely sold via Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, which may also have some inbuilt anonymity features. Mind you, in the case of Bitcoin, as we already know from the previous presentations, the blockchain is transparent. Although it's very easy to get Bitcoin just by doing a wallet-to-wallet transfer and paying in cash. So drugs, arms, illegally obtained bank client databases are typically sold in the dark web. Finding the bad guys. In terms of the deep web, special search engines that ignore the meta tags that stop indexing have to be used. Technologies that harvest data from the deep web, which is on the databases behind a website's own search engines, have to be used. So if you have databases there. And of course, if it's password protected, then you need to either, so if you're a Fed, then you need to pose as an online customer, assuming you found out about that site. And then you can decide whether you want to hack into it wherever it's legal, or you need to have a warrant to hack into it. And in certain countries, you have to have a warrant to hack into that website. You can't just hack in. In the case of dark web, you do have search engines such as Onion Link and Not Evil, which exist for Tor. The coverage is unsure. The US defense authorities are building a search engine called Memex. However, importantly, this does not cover password-protected content. So smart criminal, like I said, would only do it with password-protected content. Enforcement has made good progress through using hacking to identify people in the dark web and through the use of Bitcoin blockchain evidence. So in terms of bank's action plan, what do you guys want to, what can you do? So certainly if you have subcontractors of branded goods such as Nike producing goods who have taken credit facilities and trade finance from you, periodically checking the KYC on license renewal. So has Nike renewed their licenses to subcontract? And that's important. Where you facilitate credit card payments online, or you have accounts of payment processors such as PayPal, understanding the business model and the exposure is key. And certainly, monitoring for any huge spikes, that should be obvious. Negative news screening on clients on a risk-based basis is also important. And on a risk-based basis, you have specialized firms such as NetNames, which can help you screen for any illegal or illicit activity online. So they're focused, there are a couple of names. This is just an example. So NetNames is focused specifically on looking to see if your client has any dodgy websites from which he's doing business. So in terms of investigations, some of the comments that I'd make is that on the deep web, it's difficult, if not impossible, to control, as the criminal, his team, the website hosting service, his routing bank, his crypto wallet on the PC can all straddle multiple jurisdictions. Hosting involves fake IDs, its potential registration via crypto or prepaid cards, which is anonymized via VPN or Tor. So actually, from the Tor browser, you can also access the normal web. From the normal web, you cannot access the Tor, the dark web. But from the Tor browser, you can access the normal web. And as long as the website that you're accessing is HTTPS, then a combination of Tor and HTTPS is relatively safe for registration purposes. When I say safe, I mean from the criminal's perspective, right? By the time inter-jurisdiction legal issues are sorted out, the website is replaced. And as we know, this is the case for online piracy, it is almost impossible to stop. However, in the case of dark web, when we're talking of investigations, right, the websites are either typically home-hosted or they are on a server in a complicit data center. So if you find the location of the server, you've likely got the criminal. So what's the problem then? The problem is that Tor encrypts communication and hides the location of the servers and the users. So Tor is a very powerful browser for encrypting everything. And there are certain variations of Tor which make it even more powerful. In the dark web, a free or paid Onion web space host, the hosting facilities are available, but they can also steal your domain anytime and take it over. So criminals generally prefer to either home host it or use it on a server with a complicit data center. However, in the dark web, you have also got the age of disposable anonymous servers on Tor has also arrived, and you can take a look at this particular website. And this is typically paid in Bitcoin for 1 to 28 days. This particular web server is in the US, so I very much doubt if their services are used by criminals. But certainly it gives you an indication of the fact that you have disposable anonymous servers, and sooner or later this idea would be picked up by more shady jurisdictions. So I'll come to my last slide now. In terms of enforcement cases, so in September 2014, the FBI identification of Silk Road server in Iceland was arguably thanks to hacking, and that's what the guy put up as he said that for technical reasons, they did it without a warrant, etc. But however, the FBI claimed that a misconfiguration in an element of the Silk Road login page revealed its IP address. And in another case in February and in December 2015, the Silk Road Task Force, there were two guys out there, Carl Force, who's from the DEA, and Sean Bridges, who was a Secret Service agent, and they were working with the Silk Road Task Force. They were basically stealing Bitcoins. So they were the good guys acting bad. However, the use of blockchain evidence allowed investigators to trace all transactions to a given Bitcoin address, linking up to these agents. In July 2015, users of child pornography on Playpen were busted. The FBI used what's called a network investigative technique, or NIT. They basically put a downloaded malicious code identifies the location which is used to hack the computers. So they put a malicious code whenever you download an image, and that will identify who the guy is. So in June 2017, the feds used a slightly different, similar investigative approach, where undercover cops basically sell a fake explosive with a location tracker. In June 2017, the Dutch National Police shut Hansa, which is an online marketplace for drugs, etc., seizing the servers in Lithuania, the Netherlands, and Germany. In July 2017, Europol, along with FBI, DEA, and the Dutch National Police, seized and take down Alpha Bay, one of the largest marketplaces for drugs, guns, etc. And this was thanks to a careless use of personal email by the guy. So he was actually welcoming people from his Hotmail account, something like that, and an unencrypted admin operation. So when he was doing admin operations on his website, he was not encrypted. So he made some careless errors and he was caught. This was the guy who committed suicide, by the way. It was talked about in a different thing. September 2017, the feds undercover operations bust cases relating to 2014 and 15 of Bitcoin transmitter crimes. That is, not using a registered exchange and instead a direct transfer from a wallet to wallet for cash. So that's a crime in the US, and they enforce it through undercover operations. That's it. So those are my contacts for full suite end-to-end services across AML, KYC, projects, technology, databases. I'm developing that capability over the next few months. Those are my emails, and that is my phone number. Give me a call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rohan. So, Rohan, there was a question during lunch hours from the delegates. There was a question from the delegates. Now, they are asking, they are using Android handphone, they are using smart handphone. Can they now, after listening to your presentation, download Tor? Can they?
I'm not certain if a Tor is available on the on iPhones. I don't have an iPhone myself. You see, I have a poor Nokia Lumia.
Okay, we need to check on that. So maybe we get Mantin or someone else from the vendor solution to answer you guys. Because you guys have approached me, asking, hey, I want to access to website, the dark web. I want to purchase some goods there. You are so tagged to this topic because you want to self-experience that. So I will check for you later whether you can or not. Tor is anyway the Onion Reuters. You must have that software to access to dark web. Alright, with that, before you access, let us listen to Thai about the IP legal framework and whether is it safe for us to access to deep web. Because there are also, from my research, shows that some people got murdered. Some people got killed because they are accessing to this deep web. So, maybe you want to share your experience? Anyway, Lai is an expert in IP intellectual property right in Malaysia.
Thank you, Yunus, for the kind words. Okay, before I start on this, I like to have an idea of who my audience are. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the IP legal framework. The deep web and dark web has been covered by Rohan just now. And I'll also tell you guys how much the counterfeits are sold, so you guys have a good idea. And also what IP owners are doing to combat all this abuse in the dark web. Okay, the IP legal framework. Can I have a show of hands for anybody who know the 4 main types of intellectual property rights, that is IP? Are you guys all asleep? Okay, you're not. So you don't know what it is all about. Okay, then let's start there. Okay, our Malaysian intellectual property law is actually fully TRIPS compliance. And TRIPS is trade-related intellectual property rights. That is, a country in Malaysia need to be in compliance, to be full compliance, to become the WTO members. And we are the WTO members since 1995. So we have all the laws in place to make sure that if you have an IP right, you can enforce it in Malaysia. So in Malaysia, not only do we have the laws, we also have the courts that is also fully compliant. In KL, there's a high court specifically designated to try all IP matters. So an IP owner who have their suits, their IP rights being infringed in Malaysia can now sue these people, and then the matter will go before a judge who is very experienced in IP, who have at least a few years, and therefore you're likely to get justice being done. Okay, so this is what we have in Malaysia. So what the IP rights? So you guys do not know the 4 main IP rights. This is what it is. Firstly, it is the trademarks, the brand. So if you are thinking that you also want to sell clothes and you think NIK is a good name for it, well, it is, because it's very famous, and that is protected under the Trademark Act, because the owner of the Nike brand will have registered it, and therefore it is the only company that can use the NIKE word for clothing, for shoes. Nobody else can do that. So they can enforce those rights against anyone who is using it illegally, because then you're not allowed to use. Of course, the other IP rights are patents. Patents concern technology and invention. For example, the most easier things to refer to is like drugs. You have a drugs that can thin your blood and can help you in your heart attack and things like that. Only usually the one company that can sell the drug. That is the company that owns the patent rights. Because the drug is easily manufactured and can be replicated very easily if you have the right chemist to do it. But with patents, these companies are now protecting their brand. They are the only one who can sell it. Then the 2 other IP rights are copyright. These are the things like your computer software, music, graphic works, and things like that. And the last one is industrial design, things you buy in IKEA, the cups that look very nice, the glasses, these are all protected under industrial design. And these are the 4 main type of IPs that is protected in Malaysia. Other than that, we have things like layout design of integrated circuits. These are part of our compliance with TRIPS when we become a WTO members. They also include things like geographical indication. In Malaysia, the main geographical indication that I've come upon is actually Sarawak pepper. So if you buy pepper, they say Sarawak pepper, it must come from Sarawak and certified by the Sarawak Peppers Grower Association. That is what it protects. It protects a brand that indicates where it comes from. From the Western world, there are more, for example, champagne. You can see a lot of bubbling wine, sparkling wine that is, but they are usually not called champagne because they do not come from the place called Champagne in France. That's how geographical indication protects those brands. So if you have a geographic indication, that means it must come from this particular region or this particular place for it to be protected. Okay, what is the last thing here on, There also one more thing called New Plant Varieties Act. That is also protected in Malaysia, also because we're in compliance. This is to do with new plant. For example, Musang King. I do not know whether the Musang King, the person who actually developed the Musang King durian, has actually protected it. But if he has, he is the only one who can plant Musang King. That's the idea. So if he has done so, there's only one source of Musang King. But if he has not done so, what happened? Everybody can do it. You just buy the durian, eat it, take the seed and plant it in your backyard, and you have your own Musang King. But if it's protected, you can't do that. You can do it for own personal consumption, but you cannot then sell it. These are the IP right that's protected in Malaysia. And I have here one last one called the Trade Description Act. This is mainly for the criminal sanction for all these IP rights. If you look at the 4 acts, other than Copyright Act, they provide for criminal prosecution if you are selling or distributing infringing copies of copyright material, for example, software. A very simple example is like, you buy those 5 ringgit Microsoft Office from the Pasar Malam. These are protected by the Copyright Act. That means normally for personal consumption in Malaysia, you buy it for home use, it's not a problem. But you buy it for non-home use, non-domestic use, it amounts actually to criminal act. So therefore, company have stopped doing all these things. Because if a company being raided is found having a Microsoft Office in its computer, it cannot be for personal use. Who is the person in the company? There's none. So that is for business use. But if you do it, buy it at home, use for your PC at home, well, technically, you have not committed an offense, but Microsoft can still sue you for copyright infringement and ask you to pay the damages that it suffer for not selling you the original version. But other than Copyright Act, there are the other acts, the Patent Acts, the Industrial Design Act, the Trademark Acts, does not provide for a criminal sanction. That means if you are selling counterfeit products, the government, the police cannot prosecute you under the Trademark Acts. They can only prosecute you under the Trade Description Act. Basically, the Trade Description Act says if you're selling a product which is amount to a fake product, or which description is not correct. For example, you're selling an exercise book to the students. You say 200 page. In fact, it's only 189 page. It's 11 page short. Then you have committed an offense under the Trade Description Act. It is the same with trademarks. You're selling a branded product. You're basically making a representation to the consumer. This is the brand. You're buying a Nike t-shirt. When the product is not a Nike t-shirt, obviously the consumer is being cheated and the person selling it has committed an offense. The offense is not in the Trademark Act, but in the Trade Description Act, which is what the Enforcement Division of the Ministry of Domestic Trade uses when they do raids. This is the act that they rely on. So we go to the next. Okay, so IP framework, like you have just heard me, that usually it gives the copyright owner, the rights owner, rights that is enforceable. So most of the time, we lawyers, when handling IP cases, are doing civil litigation, civil action to enforce the rights. Now we're handling a few cases where they say you are selling a brand that's very close to mine. So you are passing off my brand, you're passing off your product as mine, or you are infringing my trademark. So all these are civil actions, and civil actions are litigated in the High Court because usually you need an injunction. Then thereafter, on top of that, we have things like criminal complaints under the Trade Description Act and the Copyright Act. So that is how IP rights are enforced in Malaysia. So this is the legal framework of the IP rights. So I'm going to skip this slide because that has been covered by Rohan. So what is being traded in the dark web? If you look at these slides here, you can see that at the bottom is actually counterfeit goods. The most thing that's being traded, or the most serious offense, actually you are trading drugs or counterfeit money. So in terms of the seriousness of the offense, you can see that counterfeit goods I put it actually at the bottom. Because a lot of time people don't think it does very much. But it does affect the IP owners. And this is how it does. Firstly, there's a loss of sales. If of course, there are a lot of fake products in the market, the real products are not being sold, right? So ultimately, there's a loss of sales. And a lot of time, consumers are duped into buying fake products. Rohan explained how this is being done just now, so I'm not going to cover this. The last thing that affects the IP owners is because there's proliferation of all these fake products. For example, if Nike is the in thing to wear, but everybody is wearing it, include the mama and the auntie who sweep the floor, then is that any value in the brand? There's none. So that's how the value is being eroded because of all these counterfeits. So we're going to look at how much things are being done. Okay, this has been covered. Okay, this is an example of what is available. You can see this is a Birkin bag. The retail price is cost 60,000 US dollars, which is now sold for less than 400. So anybody who want to buy this, maybe you'll talk to Rohan after this for how to surf the dark web. Because this is available on the dark web. It's not on the deep web. Because this is how you actually, this is where people actually know and go and source for these products. In fact, I don't, you have to talk to Rohan about this. I give further examples. This is a Patek Philippe watch. Retail price, 13,000. On the dark web, it's only sold for about 500 US dollars. Good buy, right? This is another watch, it's a Rolex. Retail about 10,000, selling for only about 800, which means it's more complex. Sorry, I've missed the two. This is the Patek Philippe, and this is the Rolex. And next is a pair of Nike Air Yeezy Red October. This is a special edition shoe, retail at 6,000, and can be available to you for 128 US dollars. Okay, how do we combat all these things? Firstly, enforcement is extremely difficult. Like Rohan has pointed out, finding the bad guys is the first thing. As a lawyer, that is not my job. I don't go and find the bad guys. I only come in after they found the bad guys, and then we can sue them. I've already said that we have the law to protect the IP right owner, and also the law for law enforcement to take action against all these people selling nefarious goods, but only if they can be found. So the main issue is how to find these people, and that Rohan has covered. And now, because this is garnering a lot of mainstream media attention, all businesses should now examine and see how best to work with the banks and work with all these compliance people and how to move forward to try to identify how these are being sold. And due to the fluid situation, action taken at this stage may or may not work because we do not know. We have a few reported cases of entire website being taken down, but we do not have enough cases to tell us what is the best way to go about it, because these are few and far between. Only now the reported one are the notorious one are the Silk Road, Alpha Bay, and Hansa. As to what are the options available, what are the strategy available to the IP right owners, we are still exploring it. So as of now, we do not know. It may or may not work. But having an overview of the landscape is important. So the IP right owners have to have overview of the whole thing and see how this particular technology is progressing, how this particular issue is progressing before they know what to do. Normally these days, IP right owners are doing test buys. Actually, they have surfed the net, they get all this email, then they do a test buy. They want to see where the money goes to. When they make payment, where does the money goes? When the product are being shipped, where are these products being shipped from? From my experience for the work that we have done in the past, a lot of time, even in Malaysia, you look at, let's say, a Facebook page in Malaysia or eBay in Malaysia, when you're buying the products, not necessarily the payment will come to a Malaysian company. The few exercises we've done for clients, the payment is actually made to another company overseas. So the recipient of the money are not Malaysians, but an overseas entity. Some are in Indonesia, some are in Philippines, some are in China. But mostly the product so far has usually been shipped from China. That's what our experience is. So therefore, for the client, for them to have this type of information and to share it on the industry is very important to move forward. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much. I'll leave it to...
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dai. So what we have learned. First, anybody in this hall can access to that web.
Thank you.
And Rohan will assist us afterward. And secondly, Tai is saying that there is extremely difficult to charge, to commit, to have a case charged in the court of law. It's difficult. But ladies and gentlemen, we are also compliance officers. Respond ability. Are we able to respond, or do we have the ability to respond to terrorist financing happening in deep web? So for that particular specific topic, Jay, you are the man. So can you share with us?
So with the limited time we have, I've got two stories for you. The first one does not have pictures. The second story has pictures. So about 2 years ago, I was helping a friend with a project. He was an intellectual property guru and lawyer. And when he used to work in New York, he had put well over 200 people in jail for violating intellectual property, specifically in the area of counterfeit goods. He subsequently moved to Singapore, and we did a project together. So there was a Italian company with an Italian brand for high-end women's sandals and shoes. And they had estimated for every one pair that they were selling, there were 25 pairs that were being counterfeited and sold, with a price differential of close to 50 times. And their view, this Italian company's view, was if they were unable to stop this, they would actually go bankrupt. And the brand name and all the goodwill that they had built up over the years would vanish because of counterfeiting and intellectual property hijacking. So we decided to take a crack at this. And when we were engaged by this Italian company that was almost on their deathbed, they asked us to go after the websites, because gone are the days when there's a permanent establishment in every part of the city, in every city in, say, all over the world, where you know exactly where to go to buy these counterfeit goods. Now you just go to the web. Whether it's deep, dark, or the regular web, you just go to the web. We start with Google, with searching. And we found about 10,000 websites that were selling this Italian brand. So you do what good people normally do, is you send them letters, and there's a way to automate this process. It's called cease and desist letters. And what they do is you tell them that your website is selling our clients' goods, and they're fake and they're counterfeit, and please stop. And what is amazing is they actually stop. So in the first month, we shut down 9,000 websites. In the second month, there were 10,000 more websites. So as Rohan indicated earlier, these things come up almost instantly. So in the second month, we continued with the cease and desist letters, and we shut down another 9,000 websites. The third month, again, there were 10,000 websites up again. So I, as the salesperson, said, this is great. This business is never going to die. We'll continue to have this business, but our client may die. This went on for 3 iterations. So we had successfully shut down about 35,000 websites, and we were running full speed to stay in the same spot. This is where the tech guys that were with us, they ran some analytics on these websites. And by running analytics, this is simple stuff to see what are the IP addresses, where are these places located, are there any common phone numbers, are there any common email addresses, are there common shipping addresses. And we found that these 35,000 websites were connected to about maybe 12 companies. And those 12 companies were run by the same 5 individuals. So going from 35,000 websites down to 5 individuals, we now had enough data to go after them. They all happened to be in China, by the way. But we collected enough data to also include the courier companies. Because if you look at the terms and conditions of a courier company, what they are allowed to transport, they are not allowed to knowingly transport fake and counterfeit and illegal goods. The key word there is knowingly. And these courier companies typically will say, well, how would I know? Well, if I know, then you ought to know. That's when we engaged Phung Lam's counterpart in the US, and we went after these guys with the intention of putting them in jail. They compromised. There was some restitution arrived at, and they stopped selling this Italian brand's shoes. But they still had their processes in place and factories in place, and then they started selling a French brand's shoes, who was not our client. So while we had solved the Italian company's issue, we now had a new client in the French company. So we approached them and said, let us do for you what we did for the Italians. So that's the first story, is you can actually make headway by using analytics and going into the web. Now, a large part of this was actually on the surface web. There was only a few instances where you clicked on that surface web link and then you went deeper into areas that you couldn't search using your regular search engine. But there's enough filth, there's enough ganja being sold and arms being sold and child pornography and people trafficking and the real, the stuff that is Satan's basement is on the website, is on the web. So that's that first story, which had a reasonably happy ending, at least for the Italian company. I'm now going to share with you, in the few minutes that we have, something that's very disturbing, which is in plain sight virtually every day. So, I don't know if you can read that clearly, but I've taken a screenshot of the Financial Times. It's definitely one of the most respected newspapers in the world. And not the primary headline, but the secondary headline, which I have circled in red. And for those of you that perhaps can't read it from there, I'll read out what that headline is. And it says, Google service books IBM, Citigroup, and Microsoft ads to jihadi's website. All three of these are US companies. All three of these are the biggest companies in this world. And their ads were landing on in this particular instance, a jihadi website. Now, what happens when these ads land on these sites is the site that this ad lands on gets paid by advertising companies that have 50, 60, 100,000, 150,000, 200, 500,000 websites where these ads will land. They're called impressions. And for this, the site where these ads land get paid. They're paid in microcents per impression. But when you add up these impressions, they can add up to pretty significant amounts. So let us take a look at what one of these sites looks like. I pressed the wrong one. Right. So, if you can't read the lines from there, the text from further back, I'll read it out to you. It says, jihadist website with beheadings profited from Google ad platform. And the young man in that picture is Mohammed Jibril, known as the Prince of Jihad, and is designated as a terrorist on the sanctions list put out by the UN and the US and the EU. And he was a subject to asset freezes, travel bans, and arms embargoes. However, he ran this site called arhama.com out of Indonesia. And he was listed as the main guy behind this site. Now, it had a lot of information on jihad, on Islam. It had a lot of information on that. But it also had a section where they would upload videos of extremely violent beheadings and people getting torched and crushed. And this was put up on the website. So clearly this guy is not someone you want to be associated with. However, we took a screen grab of his site, specifically when Citibank's ad landed on that site. Now, this is unbeknownst to Citibank. It's unbeknownst to the ad company. And it's because this is all automated. And the ads land on this site, and then at the end of the month, end of the quarter, this site gets paid. And they were getting paid close to $46,000 per year by just getting ads on their website. Now, when research was done as to how many of these sites existed, in Southeast Asia, there were about 55,000 sites. Now, not all of them were getting revenues of about $45,000 or $50,000 a year, but all of them were getting ads that were landing. So they were revenue generating. And to set up a website doesn't cost you a lot of money. But the most disturbing part was, if you can see on the top right corner of the website, I've now expanded what that link is or was, because the site has been pulled down since, contribusi. I don't speak Vasa, but I know what that means. If you clicked on that link, you could now make a donation to whatever cause using your traditional payment methods. So whether it was your credit cards or your PayPals and what have you, this website was completely kitted out to receive money from any part of the world. We don't have the data or the statistics on how much money they received through contributions from people who supported the site, but it was a lot more than the ads, the money that they were receiving from the ads that were landing on these sites. These still exist. They are in plain view. So I'm going to throw out an additional challenge. And since money is sitting over here, perhaps for next year, you may want to add this in. Is you may know your clients at the individual level. Now you're beginning to get to know your clients and the beneficial owners at the corporate level. But these are corporates that can own 10, 20, 50,000 websites that are also revenue generating. And I want to see how we address this issue of one company or one individual having control of 50,000 websites that are revenue generating, and how you as institutions, which perhaps are receiving some of the profits and revenues from these activities, on how you're going to do an additional set of KYC on websites that are revenue generating. So I throw this out as a challenge, not just to the financial services industry, but to the compliance, regtech, and fintech companies that are in this space. Because as we move greater into automation and marketplaces and bazaars online, we are going to face this issue with greater volumes. And I throw this out as a challenge for us as a society and as a community to address this issue and hopefully tackle this issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jay. That was really insight, right? We also, I think most of us, or maybe all of us, did not know that there was about a few thousand websites receiving this so-called donation. It is a kind of donation, right? You cut your salary, or you come from your saving accounts or from your credit card, you transfer money to them. Now, there's a set of questions from the audience. But before that, just to go back to the panel. Now, we have talked about dark web. We have talked about the TOR, right? The Onion Reuters. We also have talked about the IP. IP here is intellectual property. It's not an internet protocol. Now, the question here is it possible that these guys who are using the dark web, they are accessing using the Reuters TOR, send some sort of virus, and they can blow up, let's say, Washington, D.C. I saw a movie, Bruce Willis. They took over the national security via the Wi-Fi, via the email, or via the Wi-Fi internet environment. Is that possible, Rohan?
Well, you can certainly put malware in, which will go, which brings down your electricity and all your utilities stop functioning, and in that sense you will have an outage, which apparently has happened in some cities.
So it's possible.
Yeah, but it would be hopefully for a limited period of time, and then they will sort the problem out and clean out the virus.
Okay, we hold the thought. What say you, Jay?
You're talking about explosions.
Yeah.
I'm not talking
Can
about
we
explosions.
transfer our handphone, our PCs, our laptops into a bomb?
I just lack the expertise on
Okay,
that.
listen, I've heard this before, and I believe that technically it is possible, but I don't know. I don't know enough about this to say that, hey, let me blow up somebody's laptop by sending a malicious virus.
So there is a possibility. I think this is another challenge that we also have to see. We have to think about it. Whether it is possible coming to Malaysia. Because they may use, I saw one of the slides just now, Malaysians rented number 19, right? On the website, webbags, dark web, it's number 19. Now going back to the questions, we have 44 votes here. What are the red flags and characteristics of funds originating from dark web? So, Rohan?
What are the red flags for funds originating from the dark web? It's not really red flags for funds originating from the dark web. It's more at the point where cryptos are changed into US dollar, and whether that leg is properly regulated, etc. So, I mean, cryptos, you can move from one cryptocurrency to many other currencies, and that's very easy. You have a portal where you go and you set it up. I want to sell BTC, and I want to buy ADA, 15,000. You set it up. They say, here is the link, send your BTC. They send the BTC, and after some time, it comes into your ADA wallet.
Okay, how about Thai?
That is unregulated.
How about Thai? Do you have any sharing on the red flags?
Well, typically, it's not the website per se that has a bank account. It is still a corporation, it is still an entity that has that bank account. So if your transaction monitoring and KYC and due diligence and your resources are focused on the financial transaction behavior of the company, then that itself could be red flags if there's money coming in from various sources which are website-based or web-based. So there's nothing wrong with the company having 20,000 websites. You just need to be aware of it, that they are in this business of web commerce of some sort.
Okay, thanks, Jay. Anything to add on, Lai? Thai? No. Right. Next question?
I don't deal with this.
Nothing.
Let the expert.
Okay, the last question, because we just have 1 more minute to go. Okay, we go for the second highest. How does the risk of the dark web relate to AML, anti-money laundering framework for FIs, financial institutions? Please give some examples. Rohan?
Well, I mean, basically you can, there's a lot of money laundering and even sanctions violations happening on the dark web. And it does not directly relate to a bank in this, unless the companies that are committing those violations are ultimately channelizing their funds into the bank accounts. So if I have as an individual own certain BTC or own certain things which I'm doing, bad transactions on the dark web, and ultimately that money, that's why I mentioned from the dark web, when it goes into US dollar, that leg is very, very important. And then after that, it flows into a bank. So at that point, yes, the bank can get involved because it says that, okay, Rohan Bedi, who's a student, is bringing in, $5 million.
Okay. So, Thai, do you want to add on any other? No. How about Jay? Right. So with that, we only left about 1 minute. But anyway, I'm giving you each 1 minute just to conclude your presentation. Your 1 minute or less. Rohan?
Well, I would just say that cryptocurrencies are here to stay, and certainly it's difficult for governments to even bring down certain cryptocurrencies because of the nature of the currency. And to the extent that governments recognize or de-recognize the currency, of course, that influences the investor value of that particular currency. And I believe that the dark web and these problems will continue into the future and will only become more complicated. It won't become more simple.
And Thai, your IP?
For me, for IP purposes, the legal framework is there, but the issue is still finding the bad guys. As long as they can find the bad guys, identify it, well, the law can then put into work.
Jay?
Thank you very much.
That was the shortest. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for the wonderful speaking. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our presentation, Dark Web. So, things don't change by chance, it changes by choice. You have a choice, whether to download the TOR, whether you want to access to the Dark Web after this session. Remember, the risk is yours. Thank you very much. Until we meet again.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.